Learn about the one must-own stock for resource investors. Go to futuremoneytrends.com/hard assets. With less than 5% of geologists making discoveries, this tiny stock is led by a man who has had 16 discoveries, all of which have become producing mines, attracting Swiss billionaire Carlos Savelli, a large shareholder of this 20-cent stock. Get the details at futuremoneytrends.com/hard assets. Jim, I have two more topics I want to talk about. We have about 10 minutes left. World opinion and children. I'm going to be selfish, and I'm going to ask you about children first because I have a 5-year-old son, a 3-year-old daughter, and a 10-month-old daughter.
You're a wise man. Daughters are better than sons, and there's a huge shortage of females developing in the world. Well, so anybody who has daughters is doing a very wise thing.
Well, I didn't plan it that way, but that's the way it is, so I'm happy about it. But you've stated publicly that you've moved to Singapore, you've taught your kids Mandarin, and I want to know, what else have you done regarding education or anything that another parent who has young children, such as yourself, could proactively do that you are also doing, in addition to, with the exception of moving to Singapore and Mandarin, what else can parents do?
Well, yes, I moved here. Well, both of my children are native speakers of Mandarin now. They speak like natives with English and with Mandarin. And I guess not everybody can do that, but everybody should, at a very early age, start their children with 2 languages. Doesn't matter what they are. I mean, Spanish. I would say Spanish is, if you can't do Mandarin, do Spanish or Portuguese, but pick a language, because especially in their lifetimes, they've got to understand 2 languages. They're going to be at a very, very serious disadvantage to most people in the world. So that would start there. I'm trying to teach my children about saving. I'm not trying to teach them about investing. But when they were born, I got each of them several piggy banks. They have a piggy bank for U.S. dollars, one for euros, one for Chinese renminbi, etc. I'm not trying to teach them to be currency speculators, but I want them to know, A, the value of saving, and B, that there's more than one kind of money out there in the world. And that's all. I'm just planting this awareness in their minds at the moment. That's all. I'm trying to certainly teach them arithmetic and to read. But the other reason we moved to Singapore was because the schools here are extremely demanding and rigorous and advanced. My children have more homework than I had in 12 years in the U.S., and the standards are very, very high. It may even be too high in some ways, in some cases, but that's another thing that I wanted for my children. In America, they teach you self-esteem. Well, in Asia, you got to earn self-esteem in order to have self-esteem, which is something that I wanted. I grew up that way, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I'm trying to teach that sort of thing to my children. You have to earn your self-esteem. Doesn't do any good for me to sit here and say, oh my gosh, you did a great job on that math test, if they got 70. They got to get 90 or 95 for somebody to say you did great on that math test. So those are some of the things that I'm trying. Discipline, I guess, is part of what I'm saying. I'm trying to teach them the value of money, and money is not free. And I'm trying to teach them discipline, self-discipline. And I'm trying to teach them to beware of the boys. I know boys can be bad boys.
Well, a good way, I know in my town, I don't know how it is over there in Singapore, but we had a father-daughter dance, of course. So the best way to teach about boys, my guess is, as a young father, is to show them how a man is to treat a woman. I want to know if you had any fun games or anything that you did with them to either teach them about saving or make investing fun, or have you tried to introduce Monopoly to them or anything like that?
We play Monopoly periodically. To repeat, I have not tried to teach them about investing at all. They have this vague concept that their father's an investor or something like that, but they don't really know what that means. And if and when it's time, if and when they want to learn about investing, sure, I have every intention, but I don't want to impose that on them, because I have seen too many children where the parents have imposed something where they've reacted against it. Now, there are other stories where people impose things and the children became great tennis players or whatever. But you have to love it no matter what you do. And so I'm not imposing anything. But I am teaching them about saving. They have to save their money. We're going down to the they have these piggy banks. Next weekend, we're going down to the big bank to transfer money from the piggy banks to the real bank.
How about a college degree? Are you going to be emphasizing that to your children? And then, as a follow-up, do you think a degree is the same, of the same value if you're living in Asia versus the U.S.?
Well, the degrees everywhere are not what they used to be because they're so common now. If you go to look at the UK, which was the richest, most powerful country in the world for over 100 years, there were only 3 universities, essentially, four or five, let's say, in the UK. And there's still very, very few universities in the UK. They only started having universities after they went into decline. The universities were supposed to save them. Well, they've gone further into decline. So I don't know. I know that the university education and degree is much, much, much more common than it was before. It's still everybody wants to get one, and many people do get them, although their worth has gone down. I certainly expect my children to go to university, but if they tell me that they want to, I'm not going to sit and say, you must go to university. I mean, when I grew up, it was never even questioned that I would go to university. That any of my siblings, we would all go to university. My parents had, my grandparents had. But I don't know, I hope I don't insist that my children go to university, because now I and the world knows there are many other ways to be successful and happy rather than going to university. But you asked me that in 10 years, or you asked me in 30 ask me in 30 years.
Well, that's perfect. That'll lead us into world opinion. And I'm running short on time, so I'll try to make some of these questions quick. What do you think the U.S. is going to look like in 25 years versus what do you think China is going to look like in 25 years?
Well, certainly in that period of time, there have been more wars and global strife. Probably a big one, but in 25 years, just because that's the way the world has always worked. I would suspect that the U.S. will look a little bit like the U.K. did after it started going into decline. Maybe we won't be that bad unless we lose the war, which we certainly hope we don't. But in 25 years, the U.S. will show the signs of a nation in decline with staggering debts and not nearly the savior on the hill that it has been for the last 100 years. I don't particularly like saying this, and I'm an American, a taxpayer and voter like you, but I have to deal with facts. China, of course, will be much stronger and richer. They may lose the war. I have no idea who will lose what wars are coming or who will lose them, but even if they lose the war or a war, which is unlikely, but if they should, I mean, look at what happened to Germany and Japan after they lost a war or two. They're on the rise, just as Germany was on the rise. Germany lost 2 wars, but now Germany is still one of the most successful countries in the world.
Are you more bullish on China or India?
China, much.
Okay,
I own some Indian shares, but no, there's no comparison.
I've read some doubts on China's growth because of their demographics, where they're going to have like 400 million old people in the next 20 years. Have you come across this data? I'm sure you have, and why do you think that's not going to be a problem?
It is going to be. I mean, there is a problem. There are other countries that are in worse shape. If you look at Taiwan or Japan or other countries that are even worse shape demographically, and so we will see how it's going to play out. China has started reversing its one-child policy. They never should have done it in the first place, if you ask me, but that's history now. Yes, that there are going to be problems. America became the most successful country in the 20th century. On the way, we had a horrible civil war. We had 15 depressions with a D, had very few human rights, massacres in the streets, very little rule of law, and yet we still became a very successful country. China's going to have plenty of problems, including demographics. And India, too, will have problems. Their demographics are changing. They're better than China's as far as just raw numbers of birth are concerned. But both of them have serious problems. And back to a point I made earlier, both of them have a staggering shortage of girls developing. In some parts of India right now, you cannot find wives. It's a very, very serious demographic problem the shortage of females in Asia, and the status of women in Asia is going to go through the roof, because whenever you have a huge shortage, you know as well as I do that the value goes up a lot.
Yeah.
1,000 years ago in Europe, there was a shortage of girls for many of the same reasons, and boys' families in those days paid dowries. Not the girls' family. The boys' family paid the dowry because girls were short, in short supply. You needed them. Women became heads of city-states. They ran a lot of companies. The women became very, very powerful and popular in those days. There was such a shortage.
Jim, in your lifetime, you've seen London switch over to the new financial capital, which is New York. What do you think is going to be the next center? Where's the new financial capital of the world?
Probably Shanghai. But before the Second World War, Shanghai was the most important financial center between New York and London. Second World War and Mao Zedong, of course, ruined all that. But it'll be again.
And last and final question, Jim, before we close out, I just want to ask you about the U.S. and its decline. I believe you and I have talked about this in the past, about the U.S., the potential for a hyperinflation or some type of currency crisis. And I wanted to know if you have seriously considered or thought about what the U.S. will do to pull a rabbit out of its hat essentially at the last minute. Could it bring about a new currency on the eve of a dollar run, or a commodity-backed currency? You had mentioned a war. Is a war most likely?
Well, we've been having wars for thousands of years, so the idea that there wouldn't be a war in the next 25 years is pretty absurd. America's had a war almost every year, some big, some small, in the past 50 or 60 years. So, I mean, look at this guy in Washington right now. I mean, he loves war. He won the Nobel Peace Prize, I guess because he loves war so much. I don't know. The U.S., unfortunately, we're the largest debtor nation in the history of the world. I don't see it. Let me go back. No nation in history has gotten itself into this situation, has gotten out of the problem without a crisis or a semi-crisis. Well, the U.S. is certainly going to have a crisis or two or three. I hope not in our lifetimes. I hope not in our children's lifetimes, but I'm afraid that's not very realistic. Most countries use exchange controls when things start going bad. Yes, some countries do just, throw out the old currency. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the old currency was just eliminated, and they issued new currency. That's very common when countries get into trouble. So yes, something like that will happen. We may have to have some kind of commodity-backed currency, gold-backed. I mean, maybe we'll try for gold. People have often tried for gold or silver throughout history, but the U.S. certainly currency controls will come. Certainly, the currency will be much less valuable, and you and I and my children will have to learn that there are other things besides the U.S. dollar.
Jim, I'm going to have to send this interview to the CBO because in all of their projections for the U.S., they never factor in a new war over the next decade or 10 years, 20 years or 30 years. So
we have wars right now.
Yeah.
Tell them to open up the newspaper. Tell them to watch the television.
It's always missing from those projections.
We've got all kind of wars going on. I mean, look at how much did we spend in Iraq? Staggering amounts of money. And what do we have to show for it? A disaster. Look at Hillary Clinton and with Egypt. Our huge pals, the Egyptians. We spent staggering amounts of money. Now we got nothing to show for it. Libya. We quote saved Libya. Oh my God. We got to stop saving countries. It's costing us a huge amount of money and making the situations worse.
It's like every time they want to make something cheaper for us, they spread out the loan, and it's like, prices are going to go up for housing if you keep doing that.
Well, I guess about the only good thing is at least it helps Americans learn geography. We've learned so much geography since the Second World War because of all of our wars, starting with Korea and going on and on and on.
Jim Rogers, legendary investor and author. Check out Street Smarts. Check out A Gift to My Children, A Father's Lessons for Life and Investing. Jim, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
My pleasure, Daniel. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, sir.